Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Enough to Keep Going podcast, episode number 364 for November 17th, 2024. Heading straight into the end of the year now. I think we have our superlative show coming up here next month. So that should be an interesting time where we get to reflect on the year that was of gaming, at least. But before that, we have plenty of other shows to do, regular shows. I think we have probably a show before the Game Awards comes out, or after, I should say, where there's, I don't know if we all care about so much about the categories, so much as maybe some of the announcements that happened during those shows. But let me introduce you to my fellow host for tonight. Sorry, I got a little messed up there. Mr. DBQ Hams. DB, how are you?
I thought you were going to go like a father figure in GameLogIQ as he controls the podcast for us, but
No, not tonight.
that's okay.
I thought we were going to get a little George Michael there for a second.
A father
And
figure.
Mr. GameLogIQ. Game, how are you doing?
Good, man. How are you guys?
Good. I'm glad you have your Call of Duty shirt on tonight. That's nice. We'll talk about that a little bit later. First, we go on to our main GX stories with actually Mr. GameLogIQ up to bat first. I'll use our baseball analogy here, even though baseball's over. With Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak. Please tell us about this PC game. It looks like you're playing on PC, of course, obviously, since that's all you have nowadays. For now, I'm going to say that. Throw that in there.
Yeah, so we got a little video to play here.
So this came out last year, is that correct?
Yeah, it depends on I mean, so the English localization or whatever got put in this year, and I'm sorry, this gooseneck with this thing is it's driving me nuts. So I mean, so when you look at
it came out for consoles this year. Yep.
Yeah. So when you look at certain release dates, it'll say last year on the PC version, but then the console version plus the localization on the PC version came out this year. And so I don't know, Max and their sticking security settings that they've put in Sequoia. Oh, no, it is working. So I'll try and advance this a little bit now. Yeah, so I had my eye on this game for a while because I've been getting into a lot of JRPGs this year, and I know the Trails games have some popularity to them, although I have never played one myself before. There's probably lots of things that people will say that they're synonymous with or alike. The turn-based combat is not entirely dissimilar from an Atlas game. And obviously the big claim to fame for the Trail series is that it's been, there's been several games. I mean, almost, I want to say, and DBQ, you're probably more familiar with the history than I am, but I want to say like along the lines of like Yakuza, like is how prolific the games have been.
Yeah, I would say even potentially more than Yakuza. But right, there's been a number of like Trails of Cold Steel and Trails of the Sky, I believe. I mean, there were a couple of them, and they usually end up being sequenced and sequential. And this one is kind of it's a new branch of that as well, right? It's not tying back in necessarily to some of the other ones.
Yeah, so it's still one continuous like epic. The main character who you see on the screen now, as far as I understand it, is still a character from the past, like cast, but he's never been like in his own like story where he was like the mainline character. So that is what I think constitutes the first of in this iteration. The story, I don't know that it's like shockingly, unlike other JRPGs that I've played. Probably the big story here for me, at least, is just the combat, which I got, my initial exposure to just this past week. It is a mix of turn-based and real-time. And so I think the way it works is, so you have these things called shards. now that I think the way the part of it that I've speculated on, because I just haven't like dug deep to go off and find out. You have these things called shards, and when you approach combat, you throw out these shards, and that's what turns it into turn-based combat. I suspect or assume that shards are of some type of limited supply, and so if you just use them all the time, I would assume that eventually they run out. I don't know that for a fact, and I don't know that the game has really expressed that to me. But regardless, as you approach combat, you can either do real time or you can do turn based. And typically, the way I've been proceeding through the story, through the game, is I will, if there's multiple enemies on the screen and I worry that I'm going to become overwhelmed, I will typically go to turn based. But like right here, I'm in real time, and I apologize for our audio listeners. We are showing gameplay, so that's what I'm referencing. You're welcome to go check that gameplay out on the Rounding Off Infinity channel on YouTube. But if I think that the combat is going to be relatively short and quick, and I'm not worried about being overpowered, I'll just go real time. But then otherwise, if we're outnumbered, if we're not able to go man to man, so to speak, then I'll pop it into turn based. You have like multiple levels of kind of like what I would call kind of ultras or supers. And so you have crafts, and then you have arts, and they both come off with like a dissimilar effect. Like one is less powerful but doesn't have this whole big like Dragon Ball Z kind of multi-turn power up kind of thing. And I can't remember which of the two is which. I want to say that's no, I'd be guessing. I can't remember which one it is. But then the other one takes like a lengthy period of time. Like it takes you like 2 turns, right? You power up for a turn and then you pull it off the next turn. However, typically when you pull off that power, it will typically one shot an enemy, and sometimes the effects are AoE, or like you see here, they come out like in a 90-degree cone, and will hit multiple enemies. So I'm having a pretty good time so far. The one thing I will say about the story is a little maybe less JRPG-ish than I'm accustomed to, in just terms of like I think this year I've gotten over, like, you go back a year and for all the decades prior to that, and I would have just immediately said like JRPG stories just bore the heck out of me, and I have problems staying awake through like the first hour in particularly. This one, you're kind of like the premise is like you're kind of like a detective, but you're kind of like a detective, but you also have relations and know like the underworld. Like you're almost like a typical gumshoe, and so maybe the argument is even the story is maybe even a little more westernish and kind of pulls on some of those genres. Not as much as the Final Fantasy, was it this year, the one that came out that was very kind of like Games of Thrones like.
It's 2 years ago at this point, or maybe just last year with Final Fantasy 16.
Right. So it's not that far, but like I said, it does pull on that. It's a little less. I mean, in as much as it's a little less JRPG than you're running around in the sewer fighting demons, so there's still that. But it's a little. It's not as Eastern leaning as, say, Shin Megami Tensei, right? Like just with all the mysticism and that kind of stuff. So it's a little more grounded, maybe. But yeah, I'm having a good time with it so far. I haven't gotten exposed to leveling up weapons or even skill sets as much as some other JRPGs that I've played this year. But other than that, I'm having a pretty good time.
How are you finding speaking of the other ones you've played this year? So I know you spent time with Shin Megami Tensei 5. How's the combat here? You really seem to appreciate, or at least eventually get into the depth of the combat with Shin Megami Tensei 5. How are you finding the combat here so far?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, it is. I want to. It's a little less tactical and maybe thoughtful. Like Shin Megami Tensei has this whole almost like a Pokemon card kind of effect, right? In terms of like how you're constantly like swapping demons in and swapping demons out, and there's this really stock market like kind of oriented. Let me invest in it. Let me make sure I capture this type of demon. But in order to make it worthwhile for me to have that type of demon, I need to, I want these type of demons so that once I get that type of demon, then I can buff that demon with like this other thing's powers. And there were a few encounters in SMT that I was like, yeah, if I hadn't had like that character in the lineup with that particular power, I'm not exactly sure how I would have, some of those boss battles that I had to play like several times to get through. So it's a little more tactical in that than this is. But there's also like a ton of overhead. Like you spend a good chunk of time in SMT just like staring at the screen and menus, right? Just like constantly going over like your demon bank account, right? And going back to the mistress and like breaking down demons for essence and all that kind of stuff. And so this is a little less heavyweight, I would say, than that is. But I don't know. I wouldn't definitely, I wouldn't definitively say that that makes it better. And I definitely have to dig into this a little more. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes when you have more characters in the lineup, because right now I just have the one. So it'll be interesting when I see combat get a little more complex. More enemies with different types of powers. And like I said, more characters on the screen. So Hero Down Under showed up in the chat. Thanks a lot, Hero. Mentions that Final Fantasy 16. It's and I'm not sure if you were saying Final Fantasy 16 this year or Final Fantasy 16 in a previous year. But yeah, it is, and it's also strange with all the delving I've been doing into JRPGs this year that Final Fantasy. Well, I guess I did play some of the first one via the subscription services. When it was, I guess when it showed up on our PS Plus. But it was Final Fantasy 16 has still just never become a game that has really grabbed me and that I've become enamored with in comparison to all the JRPGs I've put hands on this year.
So since Swiss isn't here to ask you this question, I will ask the question of how many JRPGs have you played this year, right? So it's this one, it's Shin Megami Tensei 5. You played Eiyuden Chronicles. You also played a little bit of Unicorn Overlord.
Yep. And I think
Am
that's about.
Did you play Metaphor?
I didn't play Metaphor.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's about it. I think those are the 4 that I've spent some time delving into.
So, to Tao's question, why choose this over Metaphor if you're looking to get into another JRPG?
Mainly because what I've heard is that Metaphor is a thing that leans very heavily on SMT and Persona. And I was like, I don't know. I don't really know how much difference I'm going to find with it.
Sure. Whereas it makes a lot of sense. Yep.
Yeah. Whereas I've never played a Trails game, right? So, and it was just a matter of this one was on my list. The other thing was at the time the Metaphor came along, I was in a brief window where I just really wasn't buying anything new. And then I came out of that. And when I came out of that, there was other stuff. Like I did pick up, and you're going to have to correct me on the title, I did pick up Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake.
Yeah, whatever. 3D, yep. Add a couple other numbers in there. Yep. Right. 2D, 3D remake. Yep.
Yeah, I did pick that up this week, but I haven't had a chance to play it. But that one was like definitely on my radar. So I was just like, and actually I'm trying to remember, did I actually pick this up or had I already had this? So anyway, the reason I didn't those are the reasons I didn't go.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yep. Right? Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, just looking at this video, and then I was kind of flipping through another video while you're talking about it. So is it kind of like a modernish day setting as far as like timeline, I guess, of like where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the backdrop goes, it is slightly it's slightly futuristic. Like it's to me, the backdrop is one of these things that blurs the lines between fantasy and sci-fi. So ostensibly it's a I mean, it's a JRPG, and ostensibly it's a fantasy setting just because magic, right? But then when you look around, like at a lot of the like vehicles and other things going on, there are kind of futuristic elements to that, like in a very modern society.
And then do you fight outside at all? Because like looking at your video, it looks like you're all inside, and even a couple other videos, I was looking like you're just like in a warehouse or down in the sewers or whatever all the time.
I'm not certain. I suspect that eventually you fight in some exterior environments, but like this particular chapter and adventure that I'm going through right now, like it's you're trying to chase this guy down who is trying to duck you by going into the sewers. So sewers / subway is how they refer to it.
Okay, I was just wondering. And yeah, I was looking at the publisher and the developer. I didn't recognize the developer at all. Nihan Falcom, I think is, and then there's PH3 GmbH. I don't know. I'm looking at the Steam page here.
Yeah,
The
Falcom
developer
is
I've
a
never heard of.
long-running publisher and developer. So they've done the Ease series.
Yeah, I saw that.
yeah.
Yeah, most of the Trails series,
Mhm.
and then the publishers NIS or NIS America. So and then I've heard of them, which I mean, obviously they kind of do a bunch of stuff, but I just never heard of the developer before. So, cool. DB, any other questions for GameLogic? No. All right. If you want to jump in with your Switch title, Tetris Forever.
Sure. So last week I talked about Digital Eclipse is Atari 50 DLC. This week I am back with some more Digital Eclipse. Actually, this week I watched more videos about games than I played games, right? So between the Tetris Forever, the release of the 2-hour documentary for Half-Life 2, there's a good amount of anniversary content coming out here. So the Tetris Forever really it goes along with that same documentary gameplay type of package that Atari 50 or the Jeff Minter story, the Lamasoft Jeff Minter story. We also had the Prince of Persia one that came out, which was focused. I can't remember the developer now. So, but again, all kind of coming from the Digital Eclipse and kind of that documentary gameplay fashion preservation aspect. And so it's really a strong focus on the creator of Tetris, Alexei, and his publishing partner of Hank Rogers. And it is very much focused in on the early days of Tetris. And there's 18 different Tetris games, or maybe not quite really different Tetris games, but 18 games. I say that with hesitation of like, yes, there are 2 versions of the original kind of green box Tetris, one for the recreated of the Electronica 48K, multiple kind of versions of Bombliss and Hatris. We get Tetris, a number of games that are not the Tetris games you would normally think of. And I think I'm really enjoying. I'll start by saying I'm really enjoying this as a piece of history. I'm enjoying it less as a bunch of games, because there's a reason you don't necessarily think of these Tetris games as the cream of the crop Tetris games. That these are explorations into kind of lesser known Tetris areas. I do remember Hatris on Computer Gaming World, or back in the day of it being released in the early 90s. I did not realize the Hatris version between NES and Famicom, or the differences there. There are some nice pieces here, but it also is done in such a way that doesn't need to invest a lot of resources in licensing, right? To be able to get the NES or the Game Boy Tetris and then have this release on multiple platforms, on PC and Xbox and PlayStation, is probably a licensing challenge. To get the Tetris during when EA had it or when Ubisoft had it, and trying to get the licensing there, I would assume is also a significant challenge. And so this is very much in kind of the early development aspect of Tetris and the Tetris company to some degree. A lot of the videos talk about kind of the growth of it, and this makes sense. Most of these games all happen in the late 80s and up to the mid 90s is where the games are focused in on. But the documentary pieces are super interesting, right? There's lots of information out there about Tetris already. And there's, the dramatization of the Tetris movie and some of the over the topness there, but hearing it from Alexei and Hank Rogers is really kind of, it brings it back to its core, right? This is not an analysis video. These are just interviews and two longtime business partners and friends talking about their history of this game together. And so that part is really enjoyable. This game is $30 for me. That is worth it for kind of the documentary aspect to it. I don't know that I'll spend a lot of time with a lot of the kind of smaller games along the way. The Super Famicom and Game Boy Color games, they are I don't know if I would even call them oddities, right? That they are pieces to explore. They are artifacts from a time that I can play once or twice and go, okay, I get that. I don't know that I need to play this again. The new game is Tetris Time Warp, which is actually pretty enjoyable. It's Tetris. It's pretty straightforward Tetris until it hits a certain, like, at different intervals. It will warp you back to different time periods in Tetris. And so you jump back to a Game Boy or to the original black and green Tetris. Your movement kind of changes in that same time. You have kind of you have goals that you need to clear, whether it's a number of lines, whether it's a unleashing X number of bombs that are in the grid in order to get back to the main game. And so that part is kind of fun. It kind of spices it up in terms of mixing up the both the visual aspect of Tetris and also the mechanics. And it's a 4-player, same screen, playing it on Switch. Played it with my sons a little bit. Plenty of garbage Tetris yells as blocks are dropping down. So it's enjoyable in terms of Tetris over time. Like, there's so many other ways that you can play this. Like, if you are coming to this just for a good version of Tetris, you probably already own it, or you have access to Tetris Effects. And like the most recent kind of big high profile Tetris and Tetris Effects by the Res developers is an excellent version of Tetris with great music and visuals. If you've got Nintendo Online, you've got some versions of Tetris in there already. So in some ways, I don't feel like I'm missing out on having access to those. But what it really creates is that it prevents this, and this is where the criticism online and the reviews really comes from, that this product is not a comprehensive Tetris history. It is an early history of the company more than it is a comprehensive history of the game itself.
DBQ, I apologize if you said it at the very beginning while I was checking sound and stuff. So
I'll just pretend I did. Yeah.
is this the first Tetris Forever?
Yes.
Or is this a
so this is the
remake
first
or
time that this
remaster?
collection has happened. Yes.
'Cause I thought there was another thing called Tetris Forever that released in like 2009.
Oh, maybe there is.
Yeah, I didn't see anything when I was kind of looking it up myself, just because I wanted to see which games are in there.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize Tetris was literally just your matching hats.
Yes,
on the
Tetris
screen.
is very much.
Okay.
That's exactly what Tetris is. Yep.
All right.
Yeah, so maybe there might have been something that was a Tetris Forever.
Maybe there's a Tetris Forever like it was called something else, maybe with a collection of. I don't remember anything like that.
Yeah, could be wrong.
Okay, but yes, I'm sure in 2006 there were plenty of Tetris games that were coming out, right? Like, there's a number of. This has been a game that has always found new ways to release itself, and sometimes those spins have been interesting, and sometimes those spins have just been a reason to hold the license and put out a game. I think. I mean, we've seen Puyo Puyo Cross Tetris. We've had a couple different versions of that from Sega. So there's plenty of ways to play Tetris. I think, again, this is from a game preservation, from a game history aspect. This is interesting if you have affinity for Tetris. But similar to what I have done with the Atari games is that I don't spend a lot of time in the actual gameplay of the games. Like, I spend a little bit of time kind of exploring them, treating them as and maybe this is the librarian in me, right? Like, treating them as research artifacts and kind of understanding them, looking at the design and kind of how they communicate, realizing, yes, even on the Famicom, having two buttons that could rotate, but having one button does the drop. So it took me a little bit to get that one. Rather than using a button to rotate, it was the kind of immediate drop. And kind of, going through some of that, there's a lot of not only the videos, there's a lot of scans and images around this and around multiple different versions of Tetris over the years. The timeline is broken down into 5 different segments, but really most of those, the depth of those timelines really only take you up until the late 90s. And then you get kind of Tetris in the modern era, which has been the last 20 years of Tetris to some degree.
So you mentioned a few times, some of the commentary going on about this game so I guess the weird thing to be kind of like our discussion last week about Pokemon, although that there's things about Pokemon that I don't entirely understand, right? In terms of just how broad the base is and how many like stovepipes there are, right, in the Pokemon kind of fabric, mythological fabric, whatever you want to call it. So I guess there is a robust like community like around Tetris. And so have you, I mean, when you make some of those comments about like the running commentary on that, is that from like, have you gotten exposed into that community and like registered on any of their boards and like so are you seeing things that aren't just from the generic garden variety gamer who just happens to be playing Tetris, or are you seeing things from that commentary from like people who are like way overboard, like in deep dark tunnels and rivulets of the Tetris lore?
So maybe let me ask a clarifying question. So the commentary that I'm thinking about, I think I was referencing like the documentary videos in the game itself, less than commentary. I think in terms of this game, the only place kind of online where I've dug in is more with reviews, not necessarily getting into the kind of the Tetris I don't know, fan sites, the Tetra I have not signed up for the Tetris sub on Reddit to kind of deep dive into the representation of the Tetraminos, or how Hatris is, each different hat is a characterization of someone who worked on the original game. So no, I guess, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Because when I say the commentary you mentioned, that what I meant was some of the criticisms and stuff that you've seen. Like,
yeah, so the criticisms I've seen have really been from reviewers, and both in online websites and also in videos, in terms of really just the limited scope, right? If you want to take that in a negative way, it's a lack of comprehension or a comprehensiveness, or it's just a reality of the limited scope of what Digital Eclipse tried to do with this, or that the scope of the money they were given in order to do this, right? Like, yes, if they had the ability to go get additional licensing from multiple different companies that produce those games when Tetris was held from there, there is still, it leaves the door open for another Tetris version at some point in time that does kind of collect this all together in a way that this game doesn't necessarily.
Tetris Infinity. That'll be next. But no, yeah, there's some podcasts I had listened to that were basically mirroring what you were saying. How like they were kind of questioning the selection, and they basically said the same thing. Like, yeah, it's probably because of time and money. So, but I'm shocked.
I think that it's an easy criticism. If you don't come in thinking that this is comprehensive, it's really enjoyable for what it is. And I think in some ways, the price point of being $30 is easier to understand that it's not comprehensive. That Atari 50 came out at a kind of a full price $60 game, I think, when it first came. Sorry to cut you off there, Tao.
No, that's right. Oh, I didn't realize Atari 50 was a full price game. That's interesting. I guess that's more of a historical thing, though. They kind of go through the whole history of that one. GameLogIQ, any other questions or comments on Tetris Forever?
Yeah, I did have one other question. So you mentioned a couple of the, I guess, different like variants that there are in there, other than like the hat thing. Like, were there any games included in the collection that like were really like big departures from like the core gameplay mechanic of Tetris, or was it everything included still, dropping blocks right and stacking them vertically, to rack up a score?
There's still a lot of dropping blocks. There's some grids more than the kind of traditional vertical aspect. There's a couple of Tetris games where they were kind of in 3D that aren't represented here in terms of having a full cycle. Bombless was actually a game that I remember hearing about, but have never actually played it up until this. So that was interesting to kind of go and explore that a little bit. And that is out on, but again, it's still pretty much Tetraminos with exploding cores in them that detonate. I think there's only so many ways you can spice up a Tetramino. So no, I don't know that there's drastic shifts here. I think there are other Lexi games that went after Hatris that do kind of start to get a little different, and I can visualize them, but I should have looked them up right now. So no, not, I mean, it's not drastically kind of pulling things out of left field as much as, and even the 3D Tetris attacks, like the Pokemon version on the N64 or the Tetris Sphere, which was on N64. All right. Like, again, this goes back to licensing, that some of those games are not represented here either.
Yeah, Tetris Fair was like, I think the most one I heard the most people were kind of like, hey, where's that? That one's way better than most of these or whatever. So that's interesting though. All right, so let's. I'm gonna give you some homework too. I want you to look up some Tetris fan fiction and dive into that. See how that goes for you.
This deep love story between the left facing L and the right facing L that never the twain shall meet.
All right, let's jump into the news. I haven't. I kind of like with you, DB. I didn't really play too much this week, other than the one game I'll talk about later. So let's jump into the news. I didn't have anything new. GameLogic, you have the first. Oh, wait a minute.
Wait, I figured out the word the game that I was trying to remember. It was not. It was so Walrus is the one where you're kind of around in a circle. It's Faces. Faces came out at the same year as in 1990. Faces is basically Tetris with parts of people's faces. I do remember the box art for this from video game magazines. So no, we do not get some of the crazier versions of Alexei developed games down the road. Okay, I'm off my Tetris soapbox, but maybe that's where the combination of Faces and Hatris is where the fan fiction really is. So
yes, I've never heard of either of those games. At least I don't remember them. Maybe Face, like you said, it was probably like in a magazine I saw it or something. But anyway, GameLogic, go ahead. First news story. Let's get off of Tetris.
Okay, this first news story over on Game Developer by Justin Carter. SAG-AFTRA's newest agreement secures protections for video game dub actors. SAG-AFTRA has locked out another deal, this time for the benefit of video game localizers. The Actors Union established an independent interactive localization agreement, IILA, which covers localization of games first made in a non-English language. Its terms are similar to the budget-based tier agreement for indie developers established back in February. Under the IILA, localizers have AI protections and expanded voice print and session options for both principal and atmospheric roles as compared to the original localization agreement. So the tale of the tape on this is, the SAG-AFTRA strike has been going on for several months, and this is the strike in the video game industry. So if you roll the clock back even further and talk about the last few years, coming out of the pandemic, or actually, I think technically maybe even during the pandemic was when the writer strike started, and then the actor strike started, and then those agreements were kind of sealed up, and then it kind of floated for a few months. There was this running commentary that there was still an ongoing AI problem in the video game discussion, but it just seemed like it didn't quite boil over, and there was a lot of commentary that it's just friction, and eventually it'll go away, and then it just kind of blew up like over the summer-ish. And what's interesting about this whole thing has been these discussions have been going on for quite some time, going all the way back to the other two strikes, and to be quite honest, 80 to 90% of the things that were points of disagreement all got worked out. But this one last issue, which is about, again, hyper specific around AI, is the thing that seems to be hanging everyone up. And so, some of these things will not impact indies. Again, as the article references, there was a budget-based tier agreement for indie developers worked out earlier this year, which seems to keep protections in place for a lot of independent studios, which is why independent studio work has still been going on despite these strikes. There's no crossing the picket line when it comes to some of these indie games that have a standing agreement now in place. In the meantime, these talks have, the strike started. The talks were going on, and then they broke down, and then they went on strike. This is around the time, if people remember, that video game voice actors actually showed up in physically at the Warner Brothers lot in Hollywood, I think. Because they went to the parent company. They didn't go to wherever the esoteric office is, for the video game stuff specifically. And I think they also went there because that's where they thought they would get the most television coverage, and there were several interviews conducted out of that as that in-person striking event was occurring. But and about that time the talks had really kind of broken down. I think there were maybe a couple days of talks right around the time as that was going on, and then they broke down. And since then, each of them has come back and endured some small period of talks, and the talks have broken down again. But what SAG-AFTRA is doing is they are pursuing these limited agreements that are hyper specific around a certain specific set of work scenarios or terms and conditions under which work is done, and securing some victories out of that. What they're getting out of this agreement is an overall increase in I'll just refer to it as hourly rate. It's a little more complicated than hourly rate. It's a multiple hour recording session right within some time frame parameter. So they've locked down agreement on a labor charge for that work, and then an increase for that labor charge in 2025. What this is all about is again, it's about voice actors and other performers in video games being concerned of seeing the same things that have occurred in Hollywood, which is that you come in to record. There might be recording activities that you weren't briefed about that are clearly pointed at capturing your performance for the intention of reuse thereafter. And then let's say in the course of saying your lines, let's say that you recite a vocabulary that crosses a breadth of, I'll say, 120 words. They're also concerned about then their voice talent being used to generate their voice in a later work using those same vocabulary words right in a different script or whatever. So obviously valid concerns, and it's obviously good that this is yet another victory at a limited scale that they were able to eke out for localization. What one would hope is that eventually the industry capitulates on enough of these smaller things that it makes getting through that last mile right that much easier, because then you start going, hey, what is the valid reason why this one thing now looks radically different than all these other smaller things that we've come to an agreement on. But then again, if that was the case, then maybe we wouldn't have gotten here in the first place. There's a smattering of cast members that represent the industry in this case, including Take-Two, EA. I'm forgetting some of the other publishers right off the top of my head, but they're being represented by a subsidiary of the larger corporation that might specialize in mocap or doing all the hiring for the voice acting and setting up recording booths in studios. So it's not actually the major corporate entity of EA Games or even Vince Zampella's group. It's a hyper specific super specialty division branch that specifically manages and coordinates voice acting. So the war continues.
DB, any comments on this one?
No, I mean, yes, I guess I have comments. Not a whole lot of additional things to add because GameLogic covered that really well. I think some of the sticking points there really are not only the use, the immediate use, but the potential future use of recording assets to have them AI generated. So, yeah, that was a good rundown on the kind of nuance of the agreements and this most recent one in terms of the localization one.
And I should point out for people who haven't been tracking the story and aren't familiar with it, it is I should specify that it's not just the reuse, right? It is the reuse without paying them, right? So if you have an agreement and arrangement where, yea, verily, I'm authorized to reuse your voice, right, in however many iterations of games or game properties that I want to, maybe that's okay if you cut an agreement with me that says yeah, every time you do that, I'm going to receive some type of residual or royalty, and I'm going to be credited, right? But both of those things right now today are not there's no binding agreement requiring that, and that's kind of
Yeah,
some of the stuff that
that's a very key point, right? It is the uncredited, unpaid use. Yeah.
All right. Hello, Wara. He just popped into the chat. Thanks for joining us along with Hero. Let's jump into our next news story. So we like to do, go over the monthly charts, but we like to do other countries too. So this one is actually from Japan for October, and I'll run through a little bit of the numbers here, and then I'll go into their top 10. So number one, I'll just start off the bat, was Super Mario Party Jamboree, which debuted at number one on Japan's October chart. So, and I got this news story from Game Industry Biz from Sophie McAvoy, but the numbers at the beginning, I don't know if it's just me, but it seems a bit off. So they say it sold over 227,000 units within the first 2 weeks, which is more than the previous Mario Party Superstars, which sold 245,000 within the first 2 weeks. So maybe they just switched the numbers there or something. So it's just kind of weird, unless there's some kind of new math I don't understand, which is possible.
No, I'm seeing that as well. Like, wait a minute, that could be.
Okay. Yeah, it was probably just like a number switch or something. I didn't really notice that the first time when I was reading this article, so I was reading it beforehand. But and then they go on to say, or she goes on to say in the article, top 10 was dominated by new releases and PS5 titles, which, yeah, there was a lot of PS5 and a PS4 title with Metaphor Refantasio, along with Square Enix's Romancing Saga 2, actually appearing twice on the chart here, which I'll go over here in a second. As far as publishers, which is kind of interesting, they go over some different details than I guess that we usually see in North America, or maybe they just don't usually put them in the articles when we see them. But just publishers as a whole, Nintendo was on top at 35.9% of the market share at 3.6 billion yen, which is about 23.3 million. Atlas was at number 16, and now jumped up to number 22 with 13.2% share, courtesy of Metaphor. Switch has once again was the best selling format with 900 or just under a million 976,000 box games, which is another kind of, we don't really, I think they kind of just lump everything together in the US one, with 64,000, 64.4% of the total share market. And Nintendo also dominated the hardware charts with 242,000 units sold across all three models, followed by the PS5 in second. So just going over their top 10, once again, number one was Super Mario Party Jamboree. We got Metaphor for the PS5 at number 2. The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, number 3. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, number 4 for PS5. Professional Baseball Spirits 2024-2025, which I didn't realize was a thing, and that was also made by Konami. That was number 5 on the PS5. Switch version of the Romancing Saga was number 6. Silent Hill 2, number 7 for PS5. Romancing Saga once again this time for PS5, number 8. Metaphor for PS4, number 9, and then Call of Duty Black Ops 6 for the PS5 was number 10. So that rounds off their top 10. Anything interesting there that caught your guys' eyes at all, DB?
I think we saw this a couple of months ago when we looked at the sales charts for Japan as well, when we saw Earth Defense Force, one of the Earth Defense Force, the new one, that the PlayStation 2 or the PlayStation 4 version, it was still kind of hitting the top 10, was even hitting the top 5 in that case. So that piece to me is kind of the interesting piece of having that as big of an install base as PlayStation 4 is, that there's still enough sales out there that people are still picking up the newest Atlas game on PlayStation 4 versus PlayStation 5.
Yeah, still cracking the top 10 there. GameLogIQ, anything interesting to you here, right, in the ranking or the numbers you see?
Yep, nothing to really add.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, so let's jump into the next story, which I believe is yours, GameLogIQ, for some DLSS news.
Yep, so the story over on PC Games N by, I don't know. Oh, wait, Joel Loins. there's a new DLSS for your NVIDIA GeForce gaming GPU. Here's what it does. NVIDIA DLSS 3.8.10 sheds some weight, consolidating the different preset options for its GeForce GPUs into just 2 rather than 4. The latest version of NVIDIA DLSS has just been shrunk, simplifying the process of enabling the resolution scaling feature for GeForce graphic cards. The new release, called DLSS 3.8.10, eliminates 4 presets in favor of 2 streamlined options that combine all the features. So what this is really anchored to and tied to is the new NVIDIA app, which just rolled out this past week after being in beta for some period of time, and it's been buzzing and toggling around the news spaces as a thing for quite a number of months. And so what has recently happened is that, normally when you right click that little NVIDIA icon in your sys tray, you get 2 options, either the NVIDIA control panel or the GeForce experience. And 90% of the time, most people probably go dumpster diving into the GeForce experience. The control panel is typically something that you only really need to monkey with sometimes when you, like the first time you get a new monitor, right? You might go in. But by and large, most of the settings in the control panel app are also available in Windows, right? They're just repeats. What that control panel does sometimes do, though, is if you want to set some kind of global settings in terms of how the drivers and the GPU handle like everything, right? You can go in and you can do that in the NVIDIA control panel. So you still have access to the control panel, but the GeForce experience now has gone away, supplanted by the NVIDIA app if you do the upgrade. The big, huge thing is, I personally, I don't throw the term anti-consumer around. I use that term very rarely, and I use it very lightly. But the notion that NVIDIA and Razer are both guilty of this, which is why Razer has been voted off the island, because I don't think their products are nearly as high quality to be so brusque as NVIDIA is. But one of the most anti-consumer things both of them have done is the notion that you have to sign in to an account. And I'm like, for NVIDIA, you're making me sign in to access controls for hardware that I've already paid you for. I'm like, how ridiculous is that? And if you've done like a GeForce driver update, typically what happens is you will get logged out of the app, and you will have to log back in, right? Which means when you update drivers, you can't go in and change any of the settings that were available in the GeForce Experience app until you sign back in again. So that has gone away now in the NVIDIA app. Now you only have to sign in for NVIDIA rewards if you want them. And otherwise, you can run that app all day long without ever signing in, which is how I currently have it configured. So my understanding too is in that NVIDIA app now they've actually gone and gone in the reverse direction. Although I haven't gotten in to dig around and tinker with it that much myself. But supposedly a lot of the settings that were available in the NVIDIA control panel app are now available in the NVIDIA app. So it seems like they're trying to get much more closer to just having one app that does everything, which would be a pleasant experience. So, of course, kind of the same thing, if you pull down the app, take a look at and make sure if there are any settings that you like normally prefer, that it hasn't kind of overwritten. Like one thing the NVIDIA control panel, not the control panel, but the overlay, which is a subset of controls that have typically lived within the GeForce Experience app and which are now part of the NVIDIA app. It is notorious for flipping some things that you normally turn off back on. Like if you have keyboard shortcut set, like I use a different keyboard shortcut for recording, because the keyboard shortcut that it is normally on is something that it's not unusual for some other control in a game to be mapped to, or just I need to get to it more easily on my keyboard. Not the control panel, but the performance overlay. Normally is on Alt something or other. It's normally on Alt R, which, like I said, I have a few games that it's not unusual for that to be mapped to a control. Or R is typically the reload key on a keyboard, but I use Alt for crouching. So if I'm crouching and reloading, all of a sudden I start a recording. so I normally change that. But then when you update drivers in the old GeForce Experience and in the overlay, that will get rewritten and reset. The other one that normally also automated highlights, which is default enabled, which will sometimes kick a recording on in the background, unaware to unbeknownst to you. And so I typically turn that off, but typically when I do a driver update and I go back into the overlay, it is kicked back on, right? So, make sure if you do update, you go in and take a look at your settings and make sure that they haven't, drifted off back to the default. But along with that, along with that, also the whole point of this article is they're trying to get the NVIDIA app down to a lighter install weight than the old GeForce Experience used to be, and that's what these presets are. Even though I don't use them, there are presets that are available that you can just kind of one button hit, and it will have some configurable parameters that are set into a certain profile. And so there used to be 4 for these, now they're down to 2. Making things a little less complex. So again, those things are available to you. I don't know if this skinnier set of profiles is that they're available in this manner if you stay on the GeForce Experience. I don't know if they only present as such when you go to the NVIDIA app, the new thing. Meaning, I don't know if no matter what, if you stay on GeForce Experience, you're going to have 4 of these presets, and you're only going to get it down to 2 if you go to the NVIDIA app. So that would be worth checking out.
Yeah, actually, I did the upgrade also on the app, and I was like, why do I have to sign in all of a sudden? Like, what the heck's going on? So yeah, it was a little weird, but yeah, once I got in, it looks a little cleaner, I guess. The interface itself in the app, in the NVIDIA app now, kind of stuff is sectioned off, instead of just having like the 2. I think it was just like 2 things that you can go to, like your library, and check for updates before. So now it has drivers, has the graphic settings system, and then redeem if you do the rewards and stuff like that. So yeah, it seems to be a little bit better, at least the UI. But yeah, I turned off both the overlays for the just everything, because I didn't, I already have an overlay for Steam, and I have an overlay for Windows, obviously, if I want to record stuff. And so I didn't need any extra stuff, but it's nice. DB, I don't know if you messed with it, or if you, I don't know if you have the graphics card or not. Okay.
Yeah, I do. I have the GeForce Experience installed, but I haven't updated it yet. So now I know what I'm looking forward to, or not looking forward, but at least know what I'm getting into.
You'll have to reset your password like I had to, because I couldn't remember what it was. If you wanted to. What's the video card you have in your machine?
I have a 3060.
3060. Okay. I was just wondering. All right. So let's jump into our next. And actually, it's you, DB. Or actually, next and last news story for the night.
Yeah, we'll just do a quick hit here. Last week we had some leaked footage of what seemed to be Warcraft 2 remaster. And then this week for Warcraft's 30th anniversary, Blizzard announced Warcraft Battle Chest, basically the remasters of the original Warcraft, Warcraft 2, and Warcraft 3 Reforged 2.0. So Warcraft 3 Reforged came out 2020, 2021, somewhere around there, to infamously poor review reception and a lot of brokenness within it. The announcements around 2.0 for Reforged talks about trying to fix some of those things. In the list of what it does, it includes better user interface, better graphic options. It doesn't say a lot about AI though, in terms of the the character and unit AI, which was part of some of the problems around it as well. But in the language there, in the press release around it, they talk about that, they understood that it was broken and not right and wanted to make it right. Haven't really heard a lot, or haven't dug a whole lot into how much 2.0 patch really fixes some of the complaints. But after the top of the first of the month, I was talking about, or last month talking about the Play Nice, the Blizzard history book, and definitely this got me, came across my radar because I always have enjoyed Warcraft 3. Never got reforged because of all the challenges to it, and now kind of potentially back on my radar as well. So not a huge piece, but again, I almost picked it up and had nothing but old historic games to play this week, with the Warcraft 1 and 2 remasters as well.
Nice. Yeah, that's one I never tried this one at all. So maybe could pick it up if it comes up like on Game Pass or something one day. GameLogIQ, have you ever played any of the? I don't know if you've ever played any of the Warcrafts. I can't remember.
Yeah, I was a huge Warcraft 3 fan.
Oh,
It was kind of my first foray into anything other than Blizzard after Diablo 2. And so I was super huge disappointed right when the remaster came out. And that's, if you guys remember, that was the point where I included I included Blizzard in that group of developers that had lost their mojo. But I will say, of those, Blizzard is actually now BioWare now, right, with the release of Dragon Age: The Veilguard. So two of those developers, which were back then Bethesda, Blizzard, BioWare, and CD Projekt Red, right? We started off with the Four Horsemen, and we have since had that it went up to 5 for a while. I can't remember. I'll have to go back and look at who was the 5th one who got themselves into it. But since then, now here we stand with BioWare and Blizzard having clawed their way back. Blizzard, as of the release of Diablo 4. So, but I don't think, from what I've read, I think the jury's still out on just how good, or bad these two Warcraft remakes are, and how much of a buff the Warcraft 3 thing is. There's probably, like, even if the Warcraft 3 does right all wrongs, there's probably a good argument to, them closing the barn door after the horses have already come home on that one. So I don't know. We'll just see how it goes. I think the most disappointing thing about the whole thing is I wish they would have taken the opportunity to also put the thing on Steam, like all of their other games are now. And like I'm a little bewildered why they would go through all that effort if they have really fixed the Warcraft 3 Reforged thing or whatever, why they wouldn't have concurrently put it on Steam. So we'll have to see where they wind up with that.
yeah, they could always maybe throw it over there at some point in the future. So, all right, so that's it for the news. Let's jump into the round robin, and I'll take the first game. Like I said, I hadn't played that much this week, so when I did have time to play something other than a little bit of Rocket League and Fortnite that I've been trying to chip away at, I've been playing Call of Duty Black Ops 6. So Season 1 dropped this week, so they had the first battle pass of the year, or of this game, has come out, along with a new map on zombies, which I haven't played it. I haven't even played the second map of zombies yet, and also 3 new maps on the multiplayer: Extraction, Subsonic, and I can't remember what the other one is right now, but pretty decent map. Subsonic's a little, it's kind of a small map. You're basically in fighting in and around a hangar with like some kind of stealth ship that's like kind of right in the middle of the map, basically. But it's kind of small. It's kind of weird. It's one of those smaller maps. I don't really, not too fond of the small maps usually, but it's all right. And they've thrown actually a 4th game, I guess, or a 4th map technically, is Nuketown, which kind of released the week before, which was just like in a 24/7 mosh pit, but now it's like just the regular rotation. So we'll see that every once in a while when I'm playing multiplayer, which is fine. I used to hate that map a lot back in the day, but now it's not too bad. I don't mind it too much anymore. Just as a straight like deathmatch and the deathmatch mode, like I don't like playing objective maps in there, or mode. And then they also have a new mode called Ransack, where there's basically each team has a a stash of gold in their respective area, and you can go to the other side and try to steal from them, or there's like a third just kind of stash of gold that appears randomly throughout the play session, that you can go and steal that, and either one team can go and try to get some gold out of that. So it's kind of like this, almost like a, I guess, kind of like capture the flag, because you kind of, when you get the gold, you have to bring it back to your stash to deposit it into your bank or whatever you want to call it. So, and then I think it's maybe 150 gold or 200, something like that, and then you win the round, I believe, or if just time runs out, obviously, and whoever has the highest amount, you win. So that one, there is a map called Avalon, I believe, which is another kind of super small map. Talking about the worst spawns imaginable. Like I could, every time that map comes up, I'm like, no, I'm not playing this map. Like I'll literally leave the lobby because I was like, I can't do that particular mode in that map because it's just, the spawns are absolutely horrible. Like I kept spawning in front of people like almost all the time. I think there was like one time where somebody spawned in front of me. Most of the time I was spawning somebody in front of somebody else. I think it's probably because when your stash of gold is static on the map through the whole round, so that might be kind of the reason that it's kind of, the spawns are kind of messed up with that. So it doesn't like change around like a normal deathmatch would, or even like hard point or domination or something like that. So it doesn't kind of I don't know. Just the spawns are messed up in there. I know the spawns was kind of a thing the last couple of weeks, and I hadn't really seen it before. Like, yeah, every once in a while, it might spawn like in someone's view, line of sight or something, but it wasn't too bad. And most of the time, that person was taken out by by the time I spawned in again that second time or third time. But yeah, this one it was like really bad. So, but then along with that, and actually, I did buy the battle pass only because I think I had like 3,400, I don't know, whatever, Call of Duty points or dollars or coins or whatever it is in the game. So I just bought the battle pass. So I'm kind of working my way through that right now. So and then just played a little bit more of the campaign last couple days. I mentioned, I think last week, I was kind of in this big kind of open area where you can kind of just drive around and do like there's like story missions you can do, but then there's other things you can kind of like encampments and supply drops that have fallen down. You kind of have to take back from the enemy. And so I was doing that, and I finally finished that. I actually had to redo that one because I had started it, and I think I had gotten to like at least one of the story campaign sites, and then I had done like maybe 3 or 4 of the other kind of side quest things you can do. And I was like, all right, I got to go sleep because it was getting late. And then when I came back a couple days ago, like I just started the whole thing over. I was like, oh, that's great. So I guess even though it said there was a waypoint and it saved, it didn't. I guess it only saved for like that play session. So once you got out of it, it kind of restarted. I don't know if that was a glitch or if that's just how it is. So I finished that finally, and that took me like I think almost an hour to do everything, pretty much. So that was cool. It's just kind of fun. Like I said, you can drive around. You drive around this little Jeep that you get, and you can just kind of go from each section and do these different little quests. So it's kind of cool. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And then just multiplayer, obviously. I've been kind of grinding the battle pass and just weapons and stuff like that. But I'm just having a great time with it still. So it's been cool. Any questions on that? If not, GameLogic, if you want to jump on your game.
Yeah, there was something I was going to ask. Oh, anything new for zombies? This
Just there was a map that they dropped. I haven't played it. It's like a castle, I guess. I think I don't know if it's a direct port of an old map, or it might take elements from one of the older maps. And I can't remember. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the castle or the name of the map right now. But yeah, just the one new map. And I think they might have some new like the gobblegums and maybe a couple of weapons or so that they've added. But I haven't played that one yet. So that's it.
Okay, gotcha. The last game that I will go through is an indie game that came out actually in January of this year, called The Cub. DBQ, is this one that you're familiar with or that you've seen?
I hadn't been, but I watched a little bit of gameplay when you put it on the agenda, and it looks really interesting. I love the art style. The kind of, they talk about the inspiration being similar to like Aladdin and Jungle Book from Genesis days in terms of the kind of quick platforming.
Yep. So the game is only supposed to be 2.5 hours long. I've put about an hour into it, but I'm probably, slower and off the mark than, you would normally see, um, on how long to beat. But it's not a Metroidvania, I would say. It's definitely a pure platformer. I have not so far run into any notion where you're enabled for combat, and there's a lot of that. The game, it's a lot of very parkour like movement. The game, you know, I don't want to say it moves really fast, but it probably moves. I don't know. There's definitely kind of Ori vibes to me that I feel. And then pacing wise, there's a little bit of that Doom Eternal effect that I've always talked about when it does platforming, and which I hate whenever Doom does platforming. But there are instances where you're just flying along, and then you're supposed to react to something that you had no heads up, right, was coming on the screen. And so that can put you into kind of these death loops of a lot of trial and error. But other than that, I'm having a pretty good time with this. You don't have really any powers, so to speak, again. So you have run, jump, double jump, power jump, a slide, and a roll, and the ability to climb, and that's pretty much it. So you're just constantly subjected to like these different environmental puzzles and an occasional enemy or two, which it's just kind of designed to foul up your works. On this one, I've encountered another human with a jetpack, and I'll talk about the premise here in a bit. And so it definitely took me a while to figure out that, like, you could, you being crouched behind these walls and obstructions, led to that enemy not being able to see you, which there's nothing in the game telling you that's the mechanic. So I just had to, eventually I just figured, it just kind of became a little more obvious to me, but became obvious after I'd endured a lot of pain right, trying to get by that person. The premise behind this game is that it's at some point in the future, and people have left the planet. It was kind of a imagine the scenario of Krypton, in Superman, but the nobility knew that Jor-El was actually telling the truth, but they lied to everyone else for the purposes of exploiting them and hoarding all the resources so that they could build the ships that they needed to leave the planet. So that's kind of the premise behind this game. Then there were riots, and guerrilla attacks and all that stuff, and then most of the people were eventually able to leave. And so what's happening now at this point in the game is the humans who used to be inhabitants of Earth actually went to Mars. That they have since now come back with all their technology, to look at recolonizing the planet, but unbeknownst to them, some of the children who were left behind actually survived, right, and are now much more versed, right, in what's going on the planet and how to survive on the planet than these futuristic invaders who interestingly enough, when they come back to Earth, refer to themselves as Martians. So but yeah, it's pretty much a straight up 2D platformer, filled with just surprise mechanics of, like, you never know what's coming. It has set pieces, kind of like there's some trolley car stuff, that you have to go through and figure out. And again, that's when things are moving at the speed of light, right? And you're just kind of reacting. And if you miss it the first time, which you're highly likely to, then you just have to kind of keep doing it over and over until you finally figure it out, which is sometimes difficult because in some of those set pieces, part of the shtick of getting through them is that there's some type of physics right in the environment that behave different than anything else you've been exposed before, and so you have to sometimes do it over and over again to eventually figure that out.
Nice. And how did you pick this one up, or how did this one just cross your eye? You just going through like you mentioned before, just kind of going through Metacritic.
Yes, although I don't use Metacritic anymore because the site is
Oh,
absolutely horrible after the facelift that it did. I think in the spring they did it. And I tweeted them at them a few times, hoping that they would get the clue that what they have done is just absolutely horrible. But yes, the same type of activity, but I do it over on OpenCritic now.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, nice. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. That actually looks pretty interesting. Associations. It's not a Metroidvania like. Yeah, that's that. What was the last one I played? The Strider remake from a few years ago. That kind of killed me for Metroidvanias. That kind of killed my soul there. Just kind of all that back and forth. It just kind of kills me. So that's just me though. I know.
Yeah, there are some sections on this map. I mean, and again, it's not a Metroidvania in terms of the combat, but there are some tropes that I liken much more so to Metroidvania, which is the backtracking through levels. There is some element of that here, but that's about the only thing that I think I can kind of call out that was felt very Metroidvania, not necessarily as much kind of classic 2D platforming, but the game has an interesting mix of forgiveness versus you're not, there's no way you're going to figure this out in advance. You're you're just not going to know what to do until you're actually on that particular segment of the map and level, and have a chance to work through it.
Nice. All right. I think that'll. DB, you got any questions or comments on this game?
No, it looks really cool. It's always fun to hear some indie games that I haven't seen or heard about yet. So
yeah,
thanks, GameLogic.
I should mention. So this game is available on Good Old Games and on Steam. I picked it up from GOG. I think it was $15. I will admit, over on Steam for some period of time. I don't know exactly how long or when this ends, but I'm pretty sure it's available over there for like $7.99. So maybe it's like a 50% cut or whatever from the Steam pricing. But yeah, there are a few different places to get a hold of it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I don't know if you had mentioned it before. I was looking up a couple things. This came out this year.
Yeah, it's a January 2024 release.
January, okay. All right, cool. All right. So that'll round us out for the episode for today. Like I said, I didn't have much else to do this week. DB, anything you're looking forward to in the coming week?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know.
Games coming out.
There's
Tuesday we got the Stray for Switch, which obviously has come out on PC and PS5. My Sims bundle. I don't know if it's a remake or just a redo, which is kind of the I think it was on the Wii or maybe even the Wii U. It was kind of a Sims like with more kind of cartoony
characters. It was on the Wii. I remember My Sims, multiple My Sims. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So a couple of those. I got Toads of the Bayou, which I kind of forgot about. I remember seeing that. I think one of the directs at some point this year. It's kind of a roguelite / deck builder kind of a game. I guess coming out on PC, and Towers of Agasba, which I've never heard of that, but I was looking it up and it looks kind of cool, kind of open world, kind of fantasy game. Looks probably wish list of that one. So, and then also we have, of course, kind of the bigger ones coming out this week. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 is coming out on the 19th also for PC and Xbox Series X and S, which I'll probably hit that one up. We got Genshin Impact coming for Xbox on the 20th. Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl, coming out on the 20th also. And then the other two I wasn't too sure of, On Your Tail and Dokimon, which is coming out for Switch, PC, and then PC respectively. So I don't know if you had anything, any of those, or anything else that you were looking at.
Yeah, I was definitely with Microsoft Flight Sim looking at that to kind of play around with that a little bit. Again, didn't get big into the other one, but definitely spent a number of hours when it came out back on the Xbox Series X. I'm trying to remember because it did another update maybe last year and brought some other stuff over with it. So it's been a couple years now. The other game I'm got on my radar that I want to look at is the Lego or the Fortnite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Dimensions. So Fortnite has released a bunch of assets for TMNT. Paramount Game Studios teamed up with some developers of other Fortnite experience pieces to create a TMNT kind of beat 'em up roguelike within those assets. So again, the game that can be all games in Fortnite just to see kind of what this looks like in terms of creating other game experiences within that same engine.
Yeah, I think probably maybe getting more to that vision that they had when it was a couple years ago when they had UE5 up on stage, and they had like a kind of using the Fortnite people, though they had like you're assaulting some base or warehouse or something, which was obviously different from that regular Fortnite, and all kinds of other kind of demos they had. I think they're starting to finally get into kind of that kind of gameplay now more with some of their kind of creator games. So it's kind of nice. GameLogIQ, and actually I didn't know about that, so I'll have to check that out too. So that'd be cool. GameLogIQ, you have one game up here, but anything else on the list that I mentioned that you might check out?
Yeah, I'll mention another thing that's coming out next week is Star Wars Outlaws is coming to Steam this week for PC. So good chance that I will check out Flight Simulator 2024, Stalker 2, and I need to pick up the copy of Star Wars Outlaws that I had that I did a report out on from playing earlier this year was on PlayStation 5. So good chance that I will target that one out to bring it on board as well. I don't know if I'll get to all three of those next week. Do we know what the pricing is on Flight Simulator 2024? Is it a $70 full? I mean, I know it's a retail game, but
Believe it was full price when I looked it up, I think a few months ago. I don't remember if that was
On
full
Steam,
price.
it's full
60.
price. It's
Okay,
yeah, it's $70 on Steam.
yeah. So that
yeah.
obviously, other than the normal, flight sim stuff, you got all the jobs you can do now and stuff, which is actually kind of interesting to me. So I might stick with it a little bit more than kind of like DB, that kind of fell off pretty quick. So
Yeah, that seems a little unusual to me. I mean, so you're gonna have $140 worth of Flight Simulator, where yes, while there are some fundamental branching kind of story like or activity like stuff being added, I'm not really kind of clear and with a warm and fuzzy right how that constitutes a whole new game. At least as far as pricing goes. So it'll be interesting to see, what else is there. But
I mean, there is a $200 Aviator edition if you want to go even further. So I think the difference in some of these editions are the number of aircraft and airports. So the $200 edition gives you like 125 new aircraft and 160 new airports.
you get some aviator glasses with that, with that one. No, I was gonna say, yeah, and the first one too. I know they had released like every few months. It seemed like they released like a new section of the world or something, like airport that you can do. Yeah, I'm assuming if you get those, the big bundles, you get everything all at once, or maybe with it, throughout the year, kind of almost like a season pass or something.
yeah, so that might be one that I don't go in on like right away. But but I think what becomes particularly interesting about it is if it does wind up on Steam, as it should, then hopefully we have some chances to see some pretty steep discounts on it after a while.
Yeah, it is on Steam.
Yeah,
So.
but those will be the three. I'll be keeping an eye out on.
Nice. And you had one on here, Headquarters World War II. What is that about? If you want
Yeah,
to
so
give
that's
a
the
blurb.
turn-based World War II war game that I talked about earlier this year. I want to say that
Okay,
was a late
that's what I thought.
spring release, like
Yeah.
May, I think, or maybe early summer. I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, it is a turn-based game that has a similar feels like a graphical palette and to the Company of Heroes series, even though Company of Heroes is an RTS series, but the look of this one is similar. Um, and I had played like the first few scenarios. So I'm just looking forward to getting back to it. I don't know that it has that much, that many legs, has much legs to it. Um, Considering that I think the most recent either patch or DLC that they delivered kind of turned a lot of the owners of that game kind of negative in their opinion on it. I think maybe they were looking for something, bigger to hit with the DLC that maybe either would have corrected more or really expanded the scope of the game, but so it looks like that didn't happen. But I've had a good time with it. It has some bugs associated with it, but at the time they weren't game breaking for me. So just looking forward to kind of getting back to World War II in a turn based format and picking that up from where I left off with it before.
And that was a full release game, right? It wasn't early access or anything. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it had been in early access and then it went full, and I bought it. Once it became a full release.
Nice. All right. Yeah, and I'll probably be trying out Microsoft Flight Simulator and probably Stalker also. I never played any of the earlier games, so I'd be kind of interesting to kind of jump on this new. So, but it looks pretty cool. And then also jumping into more Call of Duty and my normal Fortnites and Rocket Leagues I'm ought to do. But that'll round us out for this week's episode, number 364. DB will be the primary host next week with GameLogIQ and myself in co-pilot seats. Thank you, Warwana and Hero, for dropping by in the comments. Please check us out if you can't make this, or if you want to check any other older shows, you can check us out online on YouTube, SoundCloud, some other sites where you get podcasts and such. Thank you once again, GameLogIQ and DBQ Hams. I am TileMeister99. Once again, this has been enough to keep going. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.